Good morning. I am straight up, it's like 6 in the morning, up and talking to you right now because it's the only time that I have an opportunity to do it usually, because I get interrupted every time I try to make a video, but it's probably not going to happen right now when the whole house is at rest. It's Sunday morning, and I had this interesting conversation yesterday that I want to bring up. I think it crosses a lot of my demographic. And I'm going to start by telling you about this time that I met this woman who seemed to have a very normal life. She was very boundaried. She had a very normal upbringing. You could just tell by the way that she talked. And I hung out with her for a good 5 hours because our kids were playing. And in those 5 hours, I shared with her my own life experience. And at one point, and I didn't realize that I did this or that I do this, but at one point she said, and she said it so delicately, but in such a almost boundaried way that it seemed like it didn't match. She said, you were really affected by the things that happened to you. And what I heard from that, even though that's not what she was saying, she was literally saying wow, this really affected you. And I could have taken that in and let that percolate and change something in me. But what I thought she was saying is, wow, you're kind of a weak victim and you need to get out of that story. Both could be true. I could hold space for both. But somebody yesterday that I was working with, and a lot of the people, especially I'm thinking about another client that I work with who actually gets a little bit bullish to me if I try to break down her story. She gets a little aggressive, and not in a just aggressive way. She gets very pointed and bullyish directly at somebody. And my client yesterday does not do that, but she doesn't do it to me. She does it to her intimate partner, I would assume. So when we were talking, I said something about the problem here, because she was talking about how she feels like a victim and that makes her blame people. And in her demographic, she's affected, or in her circumstances, she's affected by things, but so is everybody else in the system that she's in. So I normally always say, however you're feeling in the system is how everybody feels. I used to think that I was the outcast in my system and that everybody just didn't like me, which is true, but it's also true that nobody likes anybody in my system, and nobody likes themselves in my family system. So as much as I could say I'm theoretically a victim to this system, everybody in the system feels like a victim to the system. And when I went to coaching school 20 years ago, I learned about eradicating this frequency of victimhood. Not eradicating it, but moving through it and beyond it into a place of actual compassion. That's why I help people relate to the people in their story instead of demonize the people in their story. Not because I want the people in their story to be in their lives forever and improve, but because I know integration means that we relate to the people in our story. Because if we're so above it, we feel superior to it. We're separated from it. If we are so below it, we feel victim to it. We're separated from it. So my work is to get people to relate about the people in their story so they can be a sovereign entity within the story, but then so they can relate to themselves beyond the story, which most of us don't know how to do. And the story is always foundational. I've probably said in another YouTube video, the story is always foundational. It's just that we build beyond it. We are building vertical floors of our house, basically, interior landscape. So my client said, I said something about, I don't remember how the conversation went down, but I said something about her being aggressive toward these people. And she said, yeah, my husband says I'm a bully. And I said, well, yeah, of course you're going to be a bully to somebody who you're trying to get to buy into your story that you're a victim. And this was a big light bulb moment for me, because I work with a lot of people that do this. And we are this is why I do the generational work, is because it's most of the people that victimized us were victims. And I am not negating that. Like, I have done better. And I can think to myself, well, why didn't this person do better for me? But they did, actually. It just wasn't as good as I would want it to be. And there's some resentment in that. Like, well, why am I always the bigger person? Why am I always the one trying? So I was thinking about this other client that I work with who also has this, like, she wants, and it's not, she wants people to think she's a victim. It's that she wants people to know how much things affect her. And they do. And I'm thinking about somebody else, not this person I was just talking about, but in her nervous system, she's deeply affected, just like mine. My nervous system is like a sponge. I'm very affected by things. But that effect used to cause me to carry that effect with me everywhere that I went. And then it became the cause of the next chapter of every one of my stories. And that sense, and the thing is that in that dynamic, most of the time, people are not thinking about how they affect other people. They just go, oh my God, this is affecting me. So you have to see that this is affecting me. And then essentially they place themselves into a victim mentality while they're perpetrating because they want somebody else to see the way that it affects them, when they're not considering how their actions, energy specifically, words and thoughts actually affect other people around them. Your thoughts have an effect, guys. I can't say this enough. Most of my clients do the right thing. They don't understand why they're not getting the same results. And it's because their energy is not behind their righteousness, right? They're like, oh, I said the right thing, but inside I was seething and I hated this person. Well, people pick up on our thoughts and they will reflect them to us in ways that will affect us. So I just want to put out there this idea, excuse me, this idea that, you know, a lot of people too that I work with, they go, I just like, I'm misunderstood. And this is the same concept. There's like a stopping point in your energy where you can say, I'm misunderstood. And to reverse that energy into somebody who can be understood by their own understanding is to seek also to understand. And this is also a fine line because yes, reciprocity in relational realm is necessary, but you can do enough inner work to have the relationship in the exterior world and seek to be understanding. But most people are just trying to be understood when they don't even understand themselves. They're only trying to understand themselves in relation to what affects them. And then they go, well, I was a victim to that, and I need you to understand I was a victim to that. So now I'm going to bully you so that you can submit to the reality that you have affected me. But they're not seeking to understand the other person because they become closed off, which anybody in pain is going to be theoretically like closed off in a narcissistic way. But the problem is that we carry that pain with us and we don't let it end. And we seek, and I'm not speaking actually from myself at this point anymore, but I could see that this was like an old pattern in me that would seek out stories or people that would validate our stories and say, one, I see you resilient in there. Two, I'm sorry those people hurt you, which is really nice to have somebody to do that. But also we would go to the people who created those stories in us and seek them to understand what they've done and to change. And that is exactly what they did to us. And that's more of the same. And if we want to stop generational trauma really in its tracks, it is the reversal of the energy that was done to us, because most of the people who did things like that to us did not have a model. And I'm not saying drag yourself over the coals for some psychopath. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is in your everyday life, when you're dealing with people, just like random people that you're going to have to deal with every day, you recognize the effect that their actions, behaviors, and energy has on you, but you think, I need them to understand what this effect this has on me. No, you have to understand the effect it has on you. And you have to understand that you're not a victim to that effect. There is a possibility of changing your nervous system and you actually having a different, a transmutation of energy around what that effect is. And that transmutation will cause a different effect in the future chapters of your life if you allow it. So next time you're thinking, like, I really need this person to see, because I'm not even going to step into the story of victimhood, because most people don't identify with that. They just say, no, I just need him to understand he's a perpetrator, or her to understand she's a perpetrator. I'm not trying to be a victim. But even wanting somebody to, like, forcibly, somebody who does not have the capacity to receive the effect that things have on you, maybe because they're in their own pain, forcing them to see the effect just makes you vie for victimhood. And then you're gonna bully them because you're gonna perceive them when they say, I don't really get it, or like, that's not my story, or that doesn't make sense to me, so like, that's on you. The personality that believes that it's a victim to that person is of course gonna wanna bully them. Of course you're gonna come out and be like, well, you're not tending to my effect, so let me have an effect on you. And that effect is gonna be the way that you make me feel. And that's just more of the same. So, I just want to put this out there. Yeah, this concept of like when we're vying for somebody to understand our story and the effect our story has on us, that it's very easy for that energy to be flipped and for the person trying to be understood to be the one who doesn't understand and to be the protagonist, I guess I want to say, in the story. So, but it makes sense to me. This is not a bad thing. This is how the internal framework of the mind works. That if you are vying for victimhood and you have any semblance of mobilization of energy in you, the second that the person you perceive that you're a victim by says you are not a victim, you will make them a victim. You will bully them. And then you will say, no, you did this. You did this. I didn't do this. You started this. But it's more of the same. And if you really want that energy to cease in your life, you have to come to a point where you are willing to invert it or revert it from an inverted space and seek to know the effect that your energy, thoughts, and actions have on other people, rather than carrying the baggage of your past with you that says like, well, these people are the cause and I'm just the effect, knowing that you actually cause a lot in your life. And the things that you're carrying around with you actually cause a lot. And if you put those things down and you consider the effect that you have on your present day, and I'm not saying it's your fault. There's no fault here. There's nothing to blame, right? I don't want anybody to walk away from this video and be like, oh my God, I should kill myself. I'm to blame for this pattern. No, if you even understand this pattern, you have to understand that I work with hundreds of people throughout a year that have this pattern. And it is normal to me. I can just see, oh yes, of course it would end up that way, right? So I just want you to be aware that if you actually want change, this is why they say you have to be the change. Because it's not comfortable to have somebody who you feel victimized by or affected by say, no, I didn't affect you like that. And I'm not, if you're being like systematically 100% of the time gaslit, that's a different story. But most of the people I work with are out of systems at this point like that, but recreate those kinds of systems when they don't have to. And I want to help you get into a normal life that doesn't feel so charged all the time, that you come alive in the mundane where you're watching your flowers grow instead of like having to, go out and set fires everywhere in your life. The energy is actually very, you can feel the same in both if you looked at it right. So being the same in both is actually a different story. It takes a lot of practice when your default is, okay, well, I'm going to share everything that has affected me, and I'm going to let that be how I operate the way that I cause people to feel in my life. Instead of, okay, I am aware of the power of my effect present day. I have it. I am aware of the power of my thoughts, present day, which I have, which are, you know, bucking up against my past because I'm bringing my past thoughts here. But if you show up trying to be understood while theoretically forcing somebody else out and still sticking to the story you don't understand, when they're maybe even going, I do understand, I just don't think it has to be that extreme. And as a sensitive person, no, I'm not saying if somebody says, oh, why you gotta be so sensitive, that you should like fall to your knees and say, I'm a failure now. That's not what I'm saying. And also, you don't have to go, oh my God, this guy is like a total narcissist, he's gaslighting me. But being in the energy of knowing that you were affected by things that nobody else is actually. Here's the thing, most people are affected by many things similarly, not as depthfully, but similarly. So we're all universally, this is why I look at people, and I'm a student of the Course in Miracles, and I will just say, I am you. If there's somebody that I'm like, ooh, I'm repulsed by that, oh, I don't like that, I'll say, I am you. I am you. I am you. Because the energy of othering and not relating, that keeps us separated, not even from each other. My work is not even about, even though I work in the relational realm and I watch people's lives change every single day in the relational realm, that is a byproduct of the work that we do in the inner landscape that has everything to do with energy and psychology and reshaping the blueprint of a personality. So seek to understand as much as you seek to be understood. Know your effect and how it causes the next steps in your life, because you have an effect as much as these events and these people have an effect on you. Don't vie for position of victimhood by needing them to see this effect that it's had on you. They probably won't. They will when you recognize the effect that you have on them, and then you can dance differently and shape it differently. But if you have people in your life telling you that you're aggressive or that you're a bully in this way, stop vying for victimhood. Stop vying to be witnessed in the effects that these things have on you. Don't you want to be witnessed in the resilience? Don't you want to be witnessed in the places that these things don't even touch? That when you die, it's all gone, except one thing, and it's you. So check yourself if you're being a bully because you're trying to get a bully that you perceive as a bully to understand you, because it's just more of the same. And I'm not saying like back down from a bully either, right? That's not what I'm saying. But if you are just a person who systematically walks through life resentment from your past, who brings it into your present day, says you did this, you did that, you did this, and you don't let people change, you don't want change. And change is uncomfortable. But the thing about change is we have to let people change. And most of us are wildly uncomfortable allowing that to happen, because the inner narcissist in us knows that it was wrong about them. And that aspect of self doesn't want to be wrong. It's self-righteous, right? So if we watch people change, and I watch people change every single day, I watch people that it was uncomfortable for me to let change. We have to be open to them actually being a different person, which is going to require us to be a different person to assimilate the information that they are a new, different version of themselves, which is 100% possible. But not when you're going, I am a victim of you, so let me bully you. And it's super subconscious. It's like, it's not real. It's not like she's like walking around being a bully all day, every day. But when it comes out and she goes, well, you have an effect on me too, she's coming out because she has this, like, she wants people to meet her story, that she's a victim to these people, which makes sense. But the problem is, when you get to a place in your life where nobody around you believes that story, you're alone on existential loneliness island. And that's where I go, yo, all right, get in the boat, bitch. come on, we're leaving. Like, let's get back into the actual story. Let's reframe the actual story. Let's get in the characters. Let's let them change. Let's know their effect. Let's see who is what. But let's realize that we as an individual we're always all of it. That's what I said to somebody yesterday. She said, well, we're going to go down to the river. And she was talking just about herself. And that's why I love survival shows like Alone, because at the end of it, everybody who's out there alone for a while, that's when I'm like, dude, you are primed for inner work. Like if I got one of those people for a week that had been out there for freaking, I probably wouldn't even need to work on them, to be fair. Or they wouldn't need the work, I should say. But it would be fascinating to get somebody who is that spacious, that far removed from the story, who's been out in the wilderness surviving for 50 days or something. They're starving, they're hungry, but they always get to this point where they start talking in we. They understand that their inner parts are all mobilizing to be on a mission. And they no longer go from I, and they're no longer in specific aspects of self. They're theoretically in a seer aspect of themselves where they can see all of their parts mobilizing, and they start referring to themselves as a we. So when we in here do this inner work, the exterior translates differently to match the inner system of we. Other people will all of a sudden, if you transmute the energy of what we feel like in here, the world just morphs around you to shape what we, as in we collective in the relational realm, feel like together. Which takes a lot of work. It's a lot of energy to mobilize things that want to go in different directions and get them all moving in the same space. So if you want to get out of the feeling that you're always a victim, that the floor is going to fall out from under you because of these people, it's going to make you a bully. And if you don't want more of the same in your life, you're going to have to stop vying for that position, for them to see you as the victim. Because eventually, if nobody believes it, and you still believe it, you're going to be an asshole. And this is a fine line too. Like there are some people that I'm like, I know your family system doesn't validate you. I know that that's true. And I'm here to believe your story. But I'm a different breed. I always kind of say like to people who are waiting for their partners to bring them out of themselves, or they're like waiting for something to happen to bring them out. I'm like, listen, let me do that. Let me have that job. Don't go to your partners for this job. Like, don't do that. It's just crossing lines. And in the sense that like, you have to be willing to stand up and come out of yourself, to do the inner work of what I'm suggesting. And nobody in life is going to give you enough permission for you to do that very well. Unless you are in serious self-work with a witness. That's another thing about it. That's kind of, it's like I am supported by life. I'm supported by creation. I know that I am never alone. But also, having a witness to my we-ness throughout this work, and having somebody accept that but also not look at me like my story is true, that has been worth billions to me in spiritual escrow. So working with people who believe your story is very important. But if you believe your story so much that it affects you negatively at this point, and it's no longer the story that you have to live in, it has to be my job to ground somebody into a reality that says, yo, dude, like, let's get into this story where actually right now you're just trying to control the old story by being the victim or by being the bully that you didn't want to have in your old story. Which is normal, right? We want to do that. We want to have control over things. We want to master patterns. But we master them usually by power over instead of power with, or power like through almost. Power through. So there's that. Just don't do more of the same if you actually want something different. And it's easy to get stuck in that. All right. Good morning. Bye.